More than 10 years ago, Steven Spielberg and Harrison Ford teamed up once again to bring Indiana Jones back to the silver screen in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. While the movie remains a point of controversial contention among longtime fans, the franchise's fourth installment marked a major shift for the Indy brand, particularly in its choice of enemy and MacGuffin. Since Crystal Skull took place in the 1950s, the obvious choice of adversary was the Soviet Union. To reflect the sci-fi B-movies of the era, films that mirrored a fear of Russian invasion, the skull of an extra-dimensional alien was made the ancient artifact being sought by the good and bad guys. Both storytelling choices made a ton of sense for the setting, which could not take place in the 1930s again after Ford had clearly aged, albeit rather well, since the last installment, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, hit theaters 1989. And besides, Spielberg was adamant about not including Nazis, particularly the caricatures of them we see in Raiders and Crusade, after he'd tackled the sheer brutality of the Holocaust in 1993's Schindler's List. With that in mind, we have a few questions about the plot of the fifth Indiana Jones movie, which will reunite Spielberg and Ford, perhaps for the final time, under the Disney-owned Lucasfilm banner. Those questions are: what will be the time period? What mystical artifact will Professor Jones seek next, and, equally as important, who should his enemies be? Well, since 10 years have passed since Crystal Skull, the new film will have to be set in the 1960s or early 1970s in order to keep up with Ford's aging. And just to be clear, no one would want to see anyone else take on the role, even if the iconic actor is nearing 80. Unlike James Bond, upon whom the character is slightly based, Indiana Jones will always be associated with Harrison Ford and vice versa. While the new movie could, and will most likely, pass on the franchise baton to a younger hero, sorry, Shia, it'll definitely take some getting used to for many of us old school fans. Getting back to the point at hand, though, moving the setting closer to the end of the 20th century is a must in order for Indy's looks and stamina to be believable for the audience. As such, it might make the most sense for him to be on the trail of an artifact that reflects his being a little long in the tooth. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Indeed, Ford dispelled the stigma of old age in Crystal Skull by doing a lot of his own stunts and refusing the studio's wish that he wield a CGI whip. So, what kind or archaeological find would be best for an older Indy? The answer is quite simple: Noah's Ark, the biblical, boat-like vessel that saved Noah, his family, and two of every animal after God decided to destroy the world with a great flood. No, we're not crazy. The Bible says that Noah was almost 1,000 years old when he died, a little tidbit that would remind us that Jones is still as cool as he ever was, even after so much time has passed. Moreover, this parallel between the two figures would underscore the fact that age really is just a number and prove that a person pushing 80 can accomplish amazing things, just so long as they take care of themselves. By having Jones hunt down Noah's Ark, we, 1. Get a nifty little callback to Raiders of the Lost Ark, and 2. Have the artifact be a reflection of the main character rather than have the artifact be a reflection of the time period. The second point is important because the artifacts of the first 4 movies were very much influenced by their time periods, the 1930s, an era of over-the-top film serials, and 1950s, an era of communist-based fear. By switching the emphasis of the artifact's significance to be a reflection of the main character, we get a more profound and exploration from Ford, who may very well be playing the fedora-wearing protagonist for the last time. Okay, so we've got the artifact out of the way, but we still need an enemy. If we're right in the assumption that the story will be set during the 1960s or 1970s, then the obvious choice is the Soviets again. After all, the Cold War was still going strong during both of those decades. And despite major détente between the US and Russia, the conflict wouldn't officially until the early 90s. Irina Spocko, Cate Blanchett, died at the end of the last film, so it would be easy to have her child or young protege want revenge by either killing Indy or beating him to the next big artifact. But since that's the obvious answer, we'd like to see Spielberg go balls to the wall by bringing back Nazis as the main bad guys. Yes, we know he already said above that he couldn't make fun of them again after Schindler's List, but if he approached them in just the right way, he wouldn't be a hypocrite. He could achieve that by including Nazi scientists who came to America as part of Operation Paperclip after World War II. Not only that, but he should reveal that one or more have been teaching at Jones College this entire time. This would actually subvert what's come before, because Indiana spent 2 whole movies fighting against their supreme brand of evil. The 70s would be a perfect setting, as it was during this time that the idea of Nazi war criminals living comfortable lives in the US was becoming a growing concern for folks like Congresspeople Elizabeth Holtzman and Joshua Eelbach. Can you imagine if Jones found out that America had given some of the worst war criminals asylum after the war? It would serve as a great character moment where he realizes that his efforts in Raiders and Crusade were undermined by his own government. It'd also be a strong impetus for him to beat them to Noah's Ark. This would also offer some contrast to the aging element we brought up earlier, making us root for Jones even more. Where Indy's vibrancy could underscore the point that older individuals can be just as exciting as young people, the antagonism of nationalist socialists could show how such an ideology is an obsolete relic of a bygone era in a brand that perpetuates itself on old relics. Indy, our hero, has aged extremely well, while the Nazis, our bad guys, have not. It'd be some pretty sweet irony. These German scientists are ancient artifacts searching for an ancient artifact. Thematic balance, people. All the time, Spielberg never needs to characterize these old Hitler supporters as goofy or over the top. In fact, it'd be in poor taste if he did, because setting the 5th Indiana Jones movie in a post-Holocaust world would give him a chance to reflect on the horrors of the event and offer some catharsis for the audience, particularly if they're eaten by some antediluvian monster at the end. Since the first 3 films in the series were set before World War II, having Jones face off against Nazis once more, this time after they'd committed one of the worst genocides in human history, would allow him to take them to task and strike one more momentous blow to their warped ranks. Giving him a young, Jewish companion this time, an individual who maybe suffered at the hands of the Third Reich in Europe, would further the point that while the Nazis are back as the main adversaries, they represent a lot more emotionally, psychologically, and culturally than just throwaway villains.